Good morning to all of those who are streaming into our worship service today. So glad that you're a part of our worship. Thank you to the praise team for beginning to lead us in worship today. And as Tamara has said, today we're going to focus on this theme of seeing the unseen, which is living by faith. And so this is a story we're going to learn of Moses, and how Moses lived by faith, how in a difficult time he saw the unseen. And our scripture today is going to come from Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 and 2 and 24 to 27. So if you have a Bible at home, you may want to follow along, but it will also be on the screen that's in front of you as well. So Hebrews chapter 11 is a chapter which details many of the Old Testament saints, the Old Testament people, who never saw with their own eyes what they were living for, but they were called to live by faith. And because they endured great difficulty, they could endure as they saw the unseen. So I'm going to read the first two chapters of Hebrews 11, and then we're going to skip over many of these Old Testament people and go directly to Moses. So Hebrews 11, verses 1 and 2 begin like this. Now faith is, here's the definition of it, being sure of what we hope for. Now look at the next words, and certain of what we do not see. Certain of what we do not see. That's what faith is. This is what the ancients were commended for. And then it begins to go through the people of the Old Testament. But we're going to jump down to Moses, verses 24 to 27. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Note that phrase. He saw him who is invisible. Now that's a paradox. To see him who is invisible. Well, today's message is about that paradox. When life gets difficult, what you and I need to do is to see the unseen. See the unseen. That's a paradox. This is a message of hope when your life is difficult. You can keep going on even in difficult times if you see the unseen. We're going to study Moses. Because Moses saw the unseen, he could make it through a hard time in his life, 40 years in the desert. You can make it too if you, like Moses, see the unseen. Here's the key to this message. Because Moses had the long view, because he could see the unseen, see God's reward in eternity, he could keep going. As you labor uphill like he did, the key for keeping on for you is to do what Moses did, to see the unseen, to live by faith. Now that's what this message is all about. And the outline is very simple. Explanation of verses 24 to 27, and then application of verses 24 to 27. First, explanation. Verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now, maybe you didn't know this, but Moses was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter. Moses was a prince of Egypt, the wealthiest, most cultured, most advanced nation of that day. He was highly educated. Moses was a part of the royal court. Acts 7 verse 22 says, Moses was educated in all the learning of the Egyptians, a man of power in words and deeds. He read hieroglyphics. He had learned Hebrew from his Israelite mother. He could enjoy everything Egypt offered. It was all his. but with all of his privileged position, this possible heir to the throne, this possible next Pharaoh, and he was the possible next Pharaoh. Despite all that, he never forgot that he was an Israelite. And when Moses reached the age of 40, he faced a crucial decision. He had to decide between becoming a full-fledged Egyptian with absolute loyalty or to join his own people Israel and live with them in tents in the desert on the way to Canaan. Verse 24 tells of his decision. By faith, when he had grown up, Moses refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. The key word in verse 24 is the word faith. Faith simply means seeing the unseen. Now remember, Moses had it made. He might have ended up ruling Egypt, but Moses took a different path. Why? He saw the unseen. What Moses saw in the unseen world, that is what he saw by faith, made him certain that it was better to endure hardship and disgrace with God's people than enjoy luxury with God's enemies. He saw that suffering lay ahead if he identified with Israel, but he also saw that beyond that suffering, beyond it, there lay an everlasting reward. He saw that the king of Egypt would oppose him if he identified with Israel, but he also saw the unseen God, and he cared less about what the king of Egypt would do than about what the King of Kings would do. This is what seeing the unseen is all about. You don't just see the here and now, but you look ahead to the final outcome. You don't just look around at what other people think of you or do to you, but you look up to God and what He thinks of you and of the rewards He gives, which last forever. If Moses had simply hung on to his position in Egypt's royal family, he might have enjoyed himself for a few years and perhaps even risen to the throne of Egypt. But he would have long since been forgotten, and maybe he would have lost his soul forever. But because he saw the unseen by faith and acted on it, his name lives on throughout history. And he lives in glory with the God he served. So too, if your only goal in life is to protect your own position and just to enjoy yourself, you won't amount to much, and your final destiny will be miserable. But if you see the unseen like Moses did, if you live by faith and you trust what you cannot see, but you trust it by faith, then you can be used by God, like Moses, to accomplish His work. You may have to endure hardship and disgrace for the sake of Christ, but your long-term reward will far outweigh any trouble you go through now. We've read verse 24 of the explanation. Now verse 25. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. Moses had it made, but he gave it up. From the world's standpoint, he was sacrificing everything for nothing. But from God's standpoint, he was sacrificing nothing for everything. He renounced Egypt's power and prestige and honor for the sake of God. And he knew that by doing that, he would gain immeasurably more than he would ever lose. Which brings us right to verse 26. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. Look at that last phrase. Because he was looking ahead to to his reward. That is called seeing the unseen. And it led Moses to change the whole direction of his life. Just like Baron Justinian von Welz, a German Christian, a rich German Christian, renounced his title, estates, and income, renounced them. And he went as a missionary to what was then Dutch Guiana in South America. Today his body lies there in a lonely grave, and he is forgotten by the world. But we can be sure he is not forgotten by God. As he was preparing to enter missionary service, he said, quote, "What is it to me to bear the title well-born when I am born again by Christ? What is it to me to bear the title Lord when Christ is my Lord? What is it to me to be called your grace when I have need of God's grace? All of these titles I want nothing to do with, but I lay them at the feet of my Lord Jesus." That man, like Moses, saw the unseen. So Moses cared nothing for his Egyptian heritage or advantages. He saw a reward someday in God that all of Egypt could never match. Study verse 26 even more closely. Study the word regarded in verse 26. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt. That word means careful thought, not a quick decision. Means he weighed what Egypt offered against what God offered. He reached a well-founded conclusion that God's offer was superior in every way. He made a careful study of the unseen. He saw Egypt's treasure turning to trash. He saw that God had a far better reward in store for those who trust and obey him. He saw the unseen. One more verse in the explanation part of the message. Verse 27. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Verse 27 says, he left Egypt. The original Hebrew word is much stronger. It means he forsook Egypt. He did not simply leave. He turned his back on Egypt and all that it represented. He renounced it permanently. Moses forsook everything to follow the Lord. He forsook all his titles, estates, and income. Why? Verse 27 tells us, because he saw him, capital H, who is invisible. Moses knew that no matter what happened, whatever he had to face, he would be held up by God, rewarded by God. He chose to focus, and here's the whole point of the message. He chose to focus on the unseen world rather than the seen world. Let's summarize the explanation. Verses 24 to 27 is about something called living by faith. This story of Moses is set in a larger chapter, Hebrews 11, where the whole theme of that chapter is, look at all these Old Testament people who lived by faith, who dared to be obedient because they saw the unseen. That's why we also read the first two verses of Hebrews 11, because the first two verses tell us what faith is, and then the rest of the chapter details the Old Testament people who lived that way. The story of Moses today is just one of many Old Testament people mentioned in chapter 11, all of whom lived by faith, seeing the unseen. So remember how chapter 11 starts in verse 1. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Last phrase again. Certain of what we do not see. That's faith. It's seeing the unseen. Hockey superstar Wayne Gretzky said this, that the secret to his success in hockey is to move the puck not where the players are, but where they're going to be. Gretzky saw the unseen in hockey. He moved the puck to where the players will be. Russell Wilson of the Seahawks, when he throws a pass, a forward pass, where does he throw it? He doesn't throw it to where his receiver is. He throws it to where his receiver will be. We call that leading the receiver. So Russell Wilson and Wayne Gretzky both see the unseen as they move a puck or as they throw a football. So too, Moses was certain of what he could not see. That's what faith is. Faith is seeing realities that others cannot see, and then finding the strength to keep going because of that. Our natural bent is to trust our physical senses only, but the man or woman of God sees something beyond the physical. They see another unseen reality described in the Bible, and on that reality I find my hope to keep going in difficulty and to keep doing the right thing. What does this old story of Moses have to do with me? Simply this. We need to see the unseen as Moses did. We move now from explanation to application. And there are two applications I'm going to give. One is a challenge and one is a comfort. The first application is the challenge, and that is an application for obedience. Seeing the unseen will keep us obedient. I mean, come on. How often don't we Christians do sinful and stupid things? Why? Because we focus on the short-term pleasure and not on the long-term pain that sin will lead to. It's not enough to know a bunch of do's and don'ts if you want to be obedient. If you want staying power to do the right thing, you need to move beyond do's and don'ts, and we need to see the unseen. We need to see that the pleasures of sin are short-term. And then we need to keep our eyes on the unseen rewards. See, that will give us the power to remain obedient, not a bunch of do's and don'ts. 2 Timothy 4, verse 7, Paul pointed to this very thing as his power to keep on being obedient. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord will award me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who've longed for his appearing. Paul saw the unseen, and that was Paul's power to remain obedient. Let it be our power too. The second application is a comfort, and that's an application in difficulty. How do we keep going when life gets difficult? When life gets difficult, so much depends on whether we see the unseen, like Moses. Listen to 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18. For what is seen is temporary, what is unseen is eternal. The setting of that is this. Paul is writing of death, of the decay of the body. 2 Corinthians 4 is about wasting away, dying, grieving for some of you today. But Paul says not to lose heart when you go to the cemetery, not to lose heart when your body decays. Why? Because what is seen, death, and decay is temporary. But then he says, look at what is unseen. And what is unseen? Next verse, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 1. Now we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. What is unseen is heaven. Heaven may be unseen, but it is just as real as this world. Then Paul goes on to describe our future resurrection bodies. Then he writes in verse 7, we live by faith, not by sight. Meaning, see the unseen as death surrounds you. See the unseen as you bring your loved one to the cemetery. See heaven. See the coming resurrection. See the unseen. That will give you hope to keep going, even in death itself. Not just death, but as you endure difficulty in life, where you look makes a ton of difference in how well you do. I notice that runners rarely ever watch the crowd. You'll never see a good runner staring into the grandstand. Good runners' eyes are fixed straight ahead, fastened to the finish line. When we run through life's difficulties, the same principle applies. Where we look makes all the difference in how well we do when we run the race of life. The story is told of a concentration camp. On a wall in that concentration camp, a prisoner had carved these words, I believe in the sun even though it doesn't shine. I believe in love even when it isn't shown. I believe in God even when He doesn't speak. Max Lucado writes about that. I try to imagine the person who etched these words. I try to envision his skeletal hands gripping the broken glass or stone that cut the wall. I try to imagine his eyes squinting through the darkness as he carved each letter. What hand would have cut with such a conviction? What eye could have seen good in such horror? There is only one answer. Eyes that chose to see the unseen. You can keep going, even in difficult times, even when you're running uphill. You can keep going if you see the unseen. But you have to make a choice to see the unseen. You have to make a choice to see the unseen by faith. So our lives are difficult, are they not? Of course they are. Look at the situation that we're in. Life is difficult. I'd like to close by sharing with you what I see by faith. I'd like to close by sharing with you the unseen that I see that keeps me going. When I am tempted to give up, who of us isn't? When I'm tempted to give up, I see by faith Jesus saying to me someday as I stand before Him, well done, good and faithful servant. And I keep going because I see that by faith. When I visit the cemetery, I see by faith the heaven that 2 Corinthians speaks of. I see by faith the coming day of resurrection that Jesus promised. And I do not despair, even though I grieve. I grieve, but I do not despair, because I see heaven and I see the resurrection. And when the doomsayers tell us that doomsday is coming, how do I cope? I see the unseen, that the Bible says Jesus Christ is on the throne And He is coming again. And as I move into the future then, I have hope and I have confidence. Jesus is ascended. No matter what the doomsayers say, Jesus is ascended. Jesus reigns. Jesus lives. Jesus is coming again. I see that unseen truth by faith, and I will never despair. So this message is all about faith, about seeing the unseen. Faith has its own way of seeing. Faith sees not just what is happening now, but how things will turn out in the end when Jesus returns. Faith sees not just the people around you, but the God above you. Do you see the unseen? O Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back like a scroll. The trump shall resound and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul.